Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another video about one of my characters. I recently released a video, and it seemed to be pretty popular. It was a video about my character, my Ice Maiden, basically, right? The whole goal of this was to show off the Ice Maiden and to tell you about like what kind of gear I had and how the character is turning out. Well, I never did one for Godzeeler, you know what? Let's dive right into Godzeeler, shall we? So Godzeeler is a character that I designed on my own. Yes, he ended up using dreams, but that was just simply because the build that I created just works so well with whatever you would like to add it to. So what is the Godzeeler? How does it work? What kind of equipment did I end up with? Let's go over it together today. The first thing I'm going to do is take myself away from the right-hand side because we're going to be looking at my equipment. So first off, let's just go over the equipment that I have on, and we'll talk about it. So Crescent Moon. The reason why I ended up going with Crescent Moon is because of the negative 35% enemy lightning resistance. This was before the Sunders were added into the game, and quite honestly, the Sunders would only increase his killing capability quite a large amount. It would make it so that he's able to break the lightning immunes even easier, and any lightning immune that he would come across at this point would be pretty easy to kill. Crescent Moon is definitely the superior choice over something like Grief, which I did use for smiting. However, I just did not make a good choice for this particular character. I needed speed, I needed the negative enemy lightning resistance, I needed a lot of things, and I didn't need the physical damage. I wasn't a physical damage character. Although having a little bit of extra physical damage certainly wasn't terrible. I ended up using Dual Dreams, and the reason why I did this is because I wanted to add additional damage to my Godzeeler in another form. And I eventually had decided upon the lightning damage. Now, the lightning damage itself is not the only damage type that I'm dishing out, so I'm actually dishing out 3 different damage types at this point. Lightning damage, physical damage, and holy damage. So it's very interesting. The Dream Shield and the Dream Helmet, of course, are the same. I ended up with a pretty decent little crafted amulet of +2 and 19 all-res with 55% lightning. And then, of course, I'm using Gore Riders for the Crushing Blow, the Open Wounds, and the Deadly Strike, which, of course, are very nice to have on any melee character. Ravenfrost, of course, I ended up with a pretty nice Ravenfrost, a 250-19. And then I ended up choosing String of Ears over Verdungos because of the lifesteal and the magic damage reduced by. It's a pretty close race between the two, but I feel like in any case where you're actually a melee character and you're actually attacking things, String of Ears, I think, comes out on top. I also had a very nice ring given to me early on in ladder by Deviant Brute. It was a +2 minimum damage, 55 attack rating, 4% mana leech, 8% lifesteal, 3 to mana, all res 11. Ended up using that pretty much all ladder. And of course, the mainstay of my build is the Laying of Hands Bramble Mitts and the Principal Armor, which guide my Holy Bolt damage. Now, Principal Armor has an amazing effect of level 5 Holy Bolt. However, level 5 Holy Bolt does basically nothing. It's like 44 damage average per Holy Bolt, and the Holy Bolt damage that comes out of Laying of Hands is like an average of 28 damage per Holy Bolt. But the beauty of this build is that by utilizing the synergy from Fist of the Heavens, you get 50% magic damage per level. 50% times 20 levels is 1,000% increase. Now, if I take my Holy Bolt damage and I multiply it by 1,000%, I end up with some very interesting numbers. Now, I went ahead and did this for you guys so you won't have to watch me fumble through the math. Here is the math right here. All right, so the character has 2 different Holy Bolts, okay? The Holy Bolt that comes out of the armor is level 5. All right, the level 5 Holy Bolt that comes out of Principal is 40 to 48 damage for an average of 44, which is increased by 1,000% to 484 damage per Holy Bolt. It procs with a 100% chance, which means that if I do a Zeal with 5 hits, I will get 2,420 damage, which means my minimum damage, assuming that the Laying of Hands does not proc at all, is 2,420 damage per Zeal. If the Laying of Hands procs to its maximum effect of 5 times, I'm looking at 3,960. So I have a damage range with my Holy Bolts of 2,420 to 3,960 magic damage. Now, the magic damage does insane damage to demons, undead, and all sorts of other things. And it also just looks like blue confetti shooting out of my hands because, well, it is. The other interesting thing about this is that I did a lot of research into Holy Bolt, and I made sure that the Holy Bolts from both armors could actually take effect at the same time. I also noticed that despite the rather low percent chance on Laying of Hands, it would still proc a very decent amount, and the additional damage that Laying of Hands added was actually very, very nice. Not to mention, of course, the damage to demons and the increased attack speed was also a really nice boon as well. In combination with the lightning damage from my dreams, the Holy Bolt damage from my principal Laying of Hands, and of course the physical damage, the crushing blow, the open wounds, etc., this character actually rips and tears just quite well. I ended up with a pretty decent Paladin Torch of a 317-19. I have a Annihilist Charm, which is actually a 119-20-10, which is literally one off of perfect. I was using a lot of various charms that had to do with, like, for instance, I had this all-res faster run walk charm, the faster hit recovery, max damage charm here, which was very sick. The combat skills, combat skills, combat skills, combat skills. I ended up with a lot of combat skills. And of course, I had some max damage lifers, various resistance charms here and there to fill the gaps. But this particular character was very well set up, and quite honestly, he's just tanky as all get out. His mercenary actually ended up being the Enchant Mercenary. I didn't really want to use a whole lot of other mercenaries. I didn't really see much use in any of the other mercenaries. This one just seemed to be the best fit. I used Plague Blade on the mercenary. In fact, let me move myself out of the way yet again so that you can take a look at the mercenary's equipment. He's using a Plague Phase Blade. Now, I wouldn't normally make a Plague for an Act 3 Mercenary in a Phase Blade, and that just because he has a really high dex requirement, and he can't quite meet that dex requirement, which is why he ended up with a frickin' J-mod, frickin' Great Hallberg of the Whale, which I put 2 co-runes in and 2 cold facets, or sorry, fire facets, specifically so he could utilize the Plague Blade. As you can see, if I take off the armor, he can no longer use it. He's also using a Flickering Flame, of course, with a nice negative 15%, and he has a Ethereal Spirit Monarch to give him a little bit extra faster cast. He actually rips and tears really quite well. And just for the practical exam, let's go to River Flame, and let's take a look and see how well he kills things. Oh look, we're in the Terrorize zone. Oh nice, it's a level 96 zone. I can really show off his DPS output. This is, of course, Players 1, but as you can see, like, he has absolutely no issues with just about anything. I used Charge to get around. I didn't really care too much for the Enigma, except for one part during the ladder where I was trying to hit level 99. He did end up at level 97, which isn't too terrible, but quite honestly, it was really difficult to get to level 99 without resorting to the, I want to say, like, unfair tactics of just having people sit in games for me while I farm solo P8. Like, and of course, everybody always wants to come actually play with you. And I'm not going to stop somebody from coming to play with me. Like, if you want to come and play with me, I'm not going to be like, no, I am solo P8ing. You cannot dare step foot in my realm. As you can see, my damage output is actually kind of insane. I can pretty much just kill everything with one bop. And this has to do with the fact that, of course, I have the dual dreams, I have the Holy Bolt, I have the physical damage running, I have the pulse running from the dreams. And the really cool thing about the Godzeeler build is it really fits in with just about anything. Like, that's the beauty of this particular build, is that you don't necessarily have to be a Dream Paladin to make it work. It only really requires the principal armor, the Laying of Hands, and you can use the 20 points in Fist of the Heavens. And once you've done that, you can really just kind of utilize the Godzeeler in any kind of build that you want. You can put it in a Smite Paladin. You can do a Holy Fire Paladin. You can do a Holy Freeze Paladin. You can put it in a regular Zeal Paladin. Even if you're just a pure melee Zealer and you want to put it into a pure melee Zealer, it's just an additional damage type that allows you to put out more damage than you otherwise normally would. I mean, think about this. My Zeal damage right now is 603 to 7,765, right? That's partially physical damage, of course. It's partially my dream damage coming from the lightning. And then on top of that, I also have the Holy Bolt damage, which has to be added to that. So if we were to just kind of like have a theory craft here and just like add up my damage, I'm doing 603 plus basically 2,420, like my bare minimum. So my bare minimum damage is 3,023, basically like per Zeal. Actually, this is per hit, isn't it? Hold on, let me, because I have the Holy Bolt damage calculated out in per Zeal. Let's calculate out my per Zeal damage. So 603 times 5 plus 2,420. So we're looking at a bare minimum of about 5,400 and... Actually, can I bring up that window again? Let me bring up that window again. Let's actually write this down, shall we, just for fun. So we have that's our damage if we actually don't calculate in our physical, right? So with our physical, our elemental damage, etc., we're looking at 5,435 per Zeal to 7,765 times 5 plus 3,960. We're looking at a maximum of 42,785 damage per Zeal. So that's our range. So 42,785 is the maximum that we can possibly go, and 5,435 is the bare minimum that we can possibly go. All right. And this allows us to get like a kind of like a baseline of what the hell's going on with how this character built. And then of course there's more to it though. So like we also have the actual like tooltip damage that comes from the dreams, which we don't actually quite know what it is because we have to run the numbers. So like there is actually a pulse, of course, that is actually just dishing out damage, and that damage that's being dished out from the pulse does more damage the closer I am, of course, and less damage the further away I am. So as you can see, like just standing near the monsters, they're taking a pulse damage, and that pulse damage is hitting pretty hard. And this is P1, of course. But we also have the pulse damage, which is going to be added to that. So like our total damage output is probably well over 42,000. We're probably closer to like 50 or 60,000 per Zeal. And of course, Zeals go very fast. I mean, I can do a full Zeal in like, what, a second? Maybe a second and a half? Like, yeah, it's like absolutely nothing. So, and you see the Holy Bolts also have another aspect to them. This is the thing that really gets interesting, is that of course the Holy Bolts aren't doing single target damage. My Zeal is doing single target damage, but the Holy Bolts are not. So take, for instance, when I'm in a large group of monsters like this, and I start Zealing, the Holy Bolts are going through and they're hitting multiple targets. So each target is getting hit by the Holy Bolts over and over again. This allows the Holy Bolts to dish out a lot more damage than just 2,420 to 3,960, and it becomes a little mini game of placing my character correctly so that I'm getting as many of these Holy Bolts, you know, hitting as many targets as I possibly can. It's just like if you play a Amazon or a Jabazon, you know, or a Boson, you know, you would place your character correctly so that when you fire your arrow, or so that when you throw your javelin, the javelin or the arrow is going through as many targets as you can. So it's the same exact thing. I'm trying to make sure that my Holy Bolts are going through as many targets as I possibly can. And for the monsters that stack up, like for instance the ghosts, you'll find that the ghosts are just absolutely insane because they stack up on each other very nicely, and they allow the Holy Bolts to pass through every single one of the ghosts. So like if I were to go to Arcane Sanctuary, for instance, and see if I could get a nice little stack of ghosts, Let's see if I can find some ghosties. The ghosties all stack up in one spot. So when you use the holy bolts, they literally go through every single ghost, hitting every single one of them, and dishing out a massive amount of damage. And in my experience with this build, I've had so much fun with it. The Godzeeler build has really added a dynamic to the character that didn't quite exist before. Now, granted, I didn't make him this season, but that's just because I played him all last season. He's definitely very fun. And whether you're a Holy Bolt Paladin, whether you're a Zeal Paladin, whether you're a Vengeance Paladin, whether you are just a Dream Paladin or a Holy Freeze Paladin, it works really well. About the only build I think it doesn't work with is the one that requires the body armor piece, which is Dragon. So if you're a Holy Fire Paladin, you wouldn't be able to work it into the build. But it is very interesting, though, that it has a very minimal, like, overhead. We're talking about, at maximum, most characters usually get Zeal, right? Most characters usually get Zeal, and most characters usually get Holy Shield. So Paladins are already going to spend points down to Holy Shield, and they're already going to spend points down to Zeal. Now, what they don't spend points down to is Fist of the Heavens. So usually it takes 1, 2, 20, right? So 22 points in skill point investment, which is absolutely nothing for the amount of damage that it outputs. And 2 pieces of equipment. That's it. 22 points and 2 pieces of equipment, and you have your character set up correctly. Now, the other interesting thing that you can do with the Godzeeler build, which I did not do, is you can beef up the healing potential of the Holy Bolts as well. So the healing potential is governed by prayer. And if you beef up the healing potential, which is 20% life healed per level, each one of those Holy Bolts that comes out of you at any given time, if it hits a player or an NPC or your mercenary, you can heal those characters. And it's actually really quite interesting because you basically all you have to do is just line yourself up and you could point those heals at your merc. Now that does require an additional 20-point investment, which means it goes from a 22-point investment to a 42-point investment. Now the added benefit of beefing up prayer, however, is that you could main hand the Plague Sword instead of utilizing Crescent Moon. So if you main hand Plague with this particular build, you will get the Cleansing Aura. Now the Cleansing Aura gets the synergy bonus from prayer. So if you beef up prayer to its maximum, it will actually increase the healing bonus to cleansing, which will be obtained through plague. So you're basically getting a massive additional regeneration, as well as the poison and the curse clearing, which is another interesting way that the Godzeeler build can be magnified even further. Now, I did put a point into fanaticism specifically because I wanted to obviously have that for smiting, and I did have an additional weapon set. If you take a look, I have an additional weapon set, which is a Grief and a Herald of Zakarum with in it, specifically for smiting duties. When you smite with the Godzeeler build, it also applies the Holy Bolts, and it's absolutely glorious in my opinion, because the smite obviously it's a cannot miss ability, right? And so every single time you smite, you get a Holy Bolt, at least 1 Holy Bolt from the Principal, if not 2 Holy Bolts from the Laying of Hands. And the amount of damage output that you get is actually kind of insane for a smiter as well. Now, Godzeeler fits really well with a smiter in my opinion, because if you're going to build a smiter, you already know what the 2 limitations are of a smiter, okay? What are the 2 limitations of a smiter? Number 1, you're mainly single target damage, all right? This is a very big detriment. Being only single target makes you a slow killer. It doesn't matter how much damage you do per hit, you still got to run around one-bopping everything, which takes a while. Number 2, your physical damage only. Okay, which with the Sunder Charms now it's not too terrible of a thing if you can have like amp damage along with it, but this allows you to fix both of those issues, because by adding the Godzeeler into the build, you are no longer single target, because the Holy Bolts can hit everything in a line behind that target. So if you make sure that you're lining yourself up properly, or you're in a big giant group like this, you will notice that the Holy Bolts are hitting multiple targets. You can even aim them, essentially, so that you can get maximum effect out of them. Number 2, they're holy damage, and they will deal damage to all the undead and all the demons, and nothing can resist that particular damage type. So again, you are fixing 2 of the major issues with the Smiter, with the Godzeeler build. It's all very interesting, and I've had so much fun like just creating and building this character, and it's definitely one of my little pride and joys. I hope the Godzeeler name goes off to great heights. If I could make this character a little bit better, like how would I make this character a little bit better? The Sunder Charms, right off the bat, would make a huge difference. I would probably put a physical and a lightning Sunder Charm on this character, specifically because he was always really tanky anyway. And DPS output, while it wasn't necessarily an issue, I would totally have liked to see his DPS output hit new heights. And using, obviously, the dual dreams, I was getting a pretty nice benefit from the lightning. And of course, I wanted to do it even further. I wanted to go even further. So I ended up with, 3 different elements. Physical damage, of course, the lightning damage, and the Holy Bolt damage. So using the physical and lightning Sunders, I think, would make a pretty big difference on him as far as DPS output is concerned, because anytime I came across a lightning or physical immune, I wouldn't be suffering as much damage loss as I do normally. On top of that, the Conviction Aura, which I run at level 25. I don't know why it's level 26 right now, but it pretty much makes up for most of the issues on this character as well. It makes it so you don't need a huge amount of attack rating. Obviously gives you a huge negative resistance and would go well with the Sunders, I'm sure. I think that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this little preview into the end of the Godzeeler. He is still on non-ladder right now, and I don't have any plans on deleting him or anything. I think he's going to hang around for a little while, at least until I run out of character slots completely. As always, thanks for watching, and keep watching.